Hey there, Megan Jansen with Employee Wellness Solutions Network. It's Wellness Wednesday today, and I'm still continuing this mission with my guests to elevate the profile of employee wellness and corporate wellness in our workplaces in Canada. Today, I'm speaking with a mental health specialist, Cheryl Legate from Cheryl Legate and Associates. Hey, Cheryl, thanks so much for being on today and sharing your words of wisdom with us.
Hi, Megan. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about this.
Well, you've been in this industry for over 20 years. You've been on the front line. You've been in direct supports and crisis management and crisis intervention when it comes to mental health in our communities. Mm-hmm. And you definitely have so much experience to share. And I'd love to start, Cheryl, with some information in your perspective around how can mental health and mental health initiatives take on more of a preventative focus than always a reactive focus? Is this part of that stigma conversation?
There's definitely stigma around mental illness and talking about mental health and mental health concerns. We're starting to see a shift for sure. And yesterday was Bell Let's Talk Day. And it's incredible to see people reaching out, to sharing their stories all over social media, Facebook and Twitter. And I always think, this is wonderful, but why aren't we talking about this every day, right? It's not just one day a year that we, should be talking about this. And we know that there are people and corporations that are looking at putting things in place for preventative measures. In the workplace, it's kind of that slow and steady climb, but we are starting to see a shift for sure.
So in terms of some of those mental health initiatives that you speak about, when it comes to looking at a preventative measure of bringing a wellness program on site, it gives people that opportunity to talk, to be more aware of how they're feeling and how they're doing with their own personal health and wellness. And oftentimes that mental health does come into those conversations. Do you see some of these mental health initiatives as a great part or component to an overall wellness strategy?
It absolutely is, and it's so important. We talk about physical health and physical safety in the workplace. We really need to start looking at that psychological safety piece, because we know that mental health concerns, mental illness is it's an illness, just like a physical illness. And we really have to start treating it as such. And we need to start, opening the door for people to be able to talk about it. If somebody's having a terrible day and they can't get out of bed, they need to be okay to say, I'm not okay today and I need the day, and not have to make up a story about why they're not at work. And I think that that's where we really, we really need to make change. As I said, we're starting to see that a little bit, but definitely a lot more, and there's just so much that employers can do around education for their leaders, for their HR teams, for their members, and for their employees, because honestly, we all struggle with mental health, or we know somebody that struggles with mental health. So it's not like any of us are immune to it. It impacts every single person in one way or another.
And I think employers and executive leaders often think that the mental health, this is probably part of that stigma conversation, but is really more of that reactive. So they invest in programs that are just in case programs. And oftentimes people get too far along into that pathway, and where they're in crisis and really needing that assistance. So if we can I'd like to think of this as front loading an organization with preventative strategies with mental health and mental wellness, like some of the training that you do. It can be very beneficial to get that conversation started before people actually need it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's absolutely crucial. And, as employers are starting to invest in training programs, and, whether that's a one-day training, a half-day training, or a two-day mental health first aid certification workshop, people are coming away from that with so much information and so much knowledge for both the work life and the personal. life. Just that recognition of what could be a developing mental health concern. Some of those signs and symptoms that we see are often misjudged. Employers or leaders or employees, co-workers, colleagues, family members, doesn't matter. It impacts every industry. It impacts every person. So people will misjudge and think that the person is lazy, that they're weak, that they're not invested in work, that they just don't care about the job, they don't care about their employees, when really and truly that can present in such a way that it is a mental health concern, right? It could be somebody who is struggling with depression, not even realizing that they're struggling with depression, or really not knowing and not wanting to talk about it for the fear of that judgment, that stigma, for fear of being looked at differently, not taken seriously. People assume that, individuals choose to be unwell, right, in their mental health, when that's not the case. As I said, it's an illness, it's in the brain, and there are so many things that people can do for personal wellness and self-care to help them along that journey, right? But we also need that corporate side, that employer side, to be on board with the recognition and with understanding what it is and what they can do within their organizations to help that preventative piece.
And I think having that on-site presence with the mental health first aid and other half-day, full-day lunch and learn programs that a wellness program can have or be, include as part of the overall strategy, is that ability to connect with that individual. It's that on-site presence that I find is so valuable. And you just shared with me before we started today about a really interesting training you had and some of the conversations after. Share those with me a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't matter if I'm doing a one-day session or I'm doing a full 2-day mental health first aid certification program. So people will share within the group, whether they themselves have struggles or they have a child or they have somebody in their family that struggles with mental health. There's a lot of that sharing, but I can guarantee it doesn't matter what the background of people, what training they have, what industry they're in, on the breaks and on the lunch hours, and even at the end of the day, when the workshop's over and finished, people are, racing to get out the door to get home. There's always people that will come to me and talk about their personal situation. Again, whether that's with their family member, their child, share their story and really ask about resources and what can I do and where can I get connected to and how should I manage this within my family, within my life, within my workplace, whatever that looks like. But guaranteed, always going to be people that will come. And most of the time, they have never talked to anybody else about it. Mm-hmm. I had one gentleman in the company who, an older gentleman, his wife had struggles every single day and has for 30 years, but he's never talked to anybody about it. Nobody else in the workplace is aware that this is what he's managing at home. So, that's just one example of where people are coming to work and they have concerns about loved ones. And, nobody can put that 100% on the shelf as they walk into the door of their employer. So we know that people are struggling with this, and it's just so evident to me and, in my training and in talking to people, the prevalence of this and, how important it is that we really, really recognize it and start to talk about it and break that stigma down so that there is support within the workplace and that people feel like they can share without the judgment.
Well said. I interviewed Clint Malarchuk, and he said the same thing. It's up to us to continue this conversation and to allow those outlets, as you just mentioned, those outlets for employees and individuals in a workplace to be able to feel comfortable to talk about it. And, in terms of another preventative measure is maybe having somebody on site that can be that support for employees is also a really interesting way to bridge that gap and not just like hide it under the rug, but really have it visible. It increases awareness. It increases connections. It increases conversation. It helps people feel better. And it might not be for everybody, and that's okay. But at least we're able to now talk about this mental health piece as more of a preventative strategy. And I loved how you mentioned all of that. Cheryl, as we tie up our discussion today, I could talk to you forever. Any last thoughts on your professional insights pertaining to mental health in our workplaces?
Yeah, I can't reiterate enough the importance of, companies just taking that lead. There are corporations out there that really are trying to take this and run with it, put strategies in place, train their employees, train their leaders, put preventative measures into place by having an open door policy. But I really think it comes back to just the understanding of mental health and what that can look like. And when I put it out there again, we all know somebody, or we are somebody that has struggles, whether that's, with anxiety, with depression, the more common ones, but substance use falls into that category as well. And, we can guarantee that it impacts us all. So for employers to really encourage employees to have some kind of a, work-life balance, I think that is so, so important. We live in an economy now where we're on all the time. We have our screens, we have our devices, and oftentimes it's that we are answering emails at 10 p.m. You know what? We need to stop that. We really need to encourage employees to take care of themselves, right? To implement self-care strategies. I've come across workplaces where, they shut down at lunch. They literally tell employees to get away from their desk at lunchtime. There's no work. They literally turn off the internet, right? They turn everything off so the employees have to leave, and they have that hour to themselves where they can go and they can connect and they can meet a friend for lunch, or go out with a colleague, or go for a walk, or do whatever it is that self-care piece. So having employers encourage that kind of activity, definitely one really good strategy. Again, the training piece around mental health and what that means, what it looks like. How do we recognize it? How do we start a conversation? And then when we have that conversation, which oftentimes really just comes down to empathy, being human and really just caring about somebody, your fellow human being, it goes such a long way. Kindness, right? And small acts of kindness within the workplace and within our lives day to day, it just goes so far. 1 in 5 people will experience mental health, as we said, but those are just the stats. Those are only the numbers that get reported.
Yep.
We know that every week 500,000 Canadians are missing work because of mental health concerns. For employers, it's a $51 billion a year loss in productivity, in economic gain. So investing in wellness strategies and investing in preventative measures is going to directly impact that bottom line. The longer somebody's off work because of a mental health concern or an illness, the less likely it is that they're coming back. So for that employer, we look at the cost of training, the cost of hiring, and the cost of replacing and, supporting that person through a long-term disability. Yes, that's important, but why not have that person back at work, right? Better for the individual, better for the employer, better for, again, just the bottom line, in funding, right? In money, and in economic costs. So it's everyone's best interest, right? To keep people well.
Yeah, keep people well and stay preventative. Yeah, and health promotion focused, and it's definitely win-win-win all around. So
yes.
Cheryl, thank you so much for sharing your passion about mental health in our workplaces. It's a privilege for me to speak with you about this very, very important topic. And thanks for sharing your insights today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for giving me the chance. I really feel like I could talk about this all day. And for a few days, right? Which I do when I do my workshops. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks, Cheryl.
All right. Bye.